I'm Justin Davis, and this is Joe Camps RC. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the Camps channel. I'm Justin Davis, and I've been on a bit of a vacation, but now I'm back, and there was a whole bunch of stuff in my studio ready for review for you guys, and one of the things was something new from HGLRC. This is the HGLRC Titan Plus F460, and I feel like I just reviewed some huge flight controller AIO from them just recently before I left, and that was the, I believe it was the F440. 40 amp speed controller, but it was a little tiny 20 by 20 stack, and this is 30.5 by 30.5 for 5-inch race quads, all the way from 130 millimeters all the way up past 200. So you can put this on a long range setup if you wanted to. It also includes a nice VTX, and that is new as well. It goes up to 600 milliwatts, so a pretty nice long range signal back to your goggles. And they have an MMCX connector on it, which is awesome. So thumbs up to that for them for doing that. But we're going to start out with the ESCs, and the ESCs are 60 amps. So if you're looking for 6S, 6S is here, guys, and it's right here. Pretty easy to do with this board. All you have to do is hook up this cable right here, solder up your motors, your camera, and your receiver. Run a power cable up to the VTX, and you're pretty much done. So builds are getting faster and faster, and boards like this are just making it pretty easy. So if you're a new guy getting into it, I wouldn't recommend starting out on something like this on 6S. 6S kind of is, I was telling someone the other day, it's almost like having to learn how to fly all over again, because flying an acro in 6S, I just feel myself slipping out of the corners a little bit with so much extra power. I'm having to back off the throttle a little bit in a tight course. So if you're racing 6S in a tight course for multi-GP, you're one hell of a pilot, and I can respect that. So also in this review, we're going to check out another new item from HGLRC, and this is the 60 amp 32-bit BL Heli ESCs, and these are the standalone ESCs that they offer for a 6S setup right now. They look pretty beasty, and they come with some pretty thick wire along with it. So we're probably looking at like 10 gauge wire here. This looks pretty beasty compared to some of the other ESC power wires that I've gotten in the past. So things are moving up, and 6S might even be the new 4S for 2018. But let's go ahead and break down this board. Let's put this board on the bench. Let's talk about the ESCs first, and then I'll give you a close-up of the flight controller and the VTX. All right, let's go ahead and bust into the box. This is the box, and it shows you what's included here. It gives you a QR code you can scan with your phone, and probably go to the HGLRC website with more specs and information on this, maybe even the schematic for the flight controller layout. But included in this box, everything you pretty much need to fly. And they did leave out a few things, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But we have the Airbus F4, that's the flight controller itself that's in there. You get one of those. You get one 4-in-1 BS60A, they have it labeled. That's 32-bit BL Heli ESCs, and capable of handling 4 to 6S, so it's pretty sweet there. And you get that GTX 585 with an SMA female connector on there for your larger circular polarized antenna, and you get an MMCX connector on that as well. And I'll just go ahead and show you inside the box there. Look at that. Pretty nice layout. The ESCs, the flight controller, the GTX 585 right there, and your cable for connecting your antenna. So let's go ahead and pull these out, and I'll give you a little closer look at the ESCs themselves. This is the little wire harness on the side here. Pretty nice thin profile ESC. There's not a lot of chips sticking out top and bottom, which is nice. So you can add a shorter sort of standoff in between there. But I'm going to show you this one close up right now. But before I do that, I got to talk about these standoffs here. I saw someone else's review, and it looked like they had a little issues with the placement of the VTX, maybe a little bit too close, and possibly having to flip it upside down. There are a little bit longer standoffs in here, and there's two that are actually a little bit longer, and those will go on the side of the VTX, which will make it stand just a little bit higher. Use the shorter ones for the bottom of the ESCs coming up to the flight controller. Use the taller ones for coming off the flight controller to the VTX, so it stands up just a little bit higher and doesn't touch anything on the flight controller. And also in this box, this is your wire harness. This is going to come up and power your flight controller from the ESCs. Also, it's going to give your ESCs some signal there for each motor connecting to the flight controller. And you get a little manual in here for the VTX, for that GTX 585. This is cool. It shows you how to change the power, and you're going to long press on the button to change the power from 25, 100, 200, 400, and 600 milliwatts. So changing channels is just a short press, and a little bit longer press for 2 seconds will change the bands on there. So pretty cut and dry, and it gives you a frequency channel table on the inside. You get A, B, E, F, R, and L. So race bands also included, which is cool. And inside the box, this is always nice. I love this full color schematic that HGLRC always gives along with their flight controllers. This is sweet because you don't have to go searching around when you're trying to solder up stuff. So a nice little card you can keep handy on the bench when you're doing your build. So here we have their ESC 4-in-1 combo, and I have an example of a 6S battery that I've been running here, and this one seems to be running pretty well. I've been testing it out on the new America quad from Catalyst Machine Works, and these are some pretty awesome batteries. I was kind of wondering if I shouldn't have the 1300, but the 1050 still gets me around 3 minutes flight time on 6S. So if you're looking to do 6S, you can try one of these, and definitely this is the way to do it. So their board, it says Dino Shot on there, and I guess that's maybe named after the T-Rex logo there from HGLRC, and that's kind of cool. Doesn't have anything to do with the protocol that's flashed on here, so you're going to be using 32-bit BL Heli on that. So and this is also going to clean up your video a lot. If you're running 6S type of voltage on here, you're running 22 volts on here. I believe that's 22, let's see, it doesn't have it listed. Oh yeah, 22.2 volts. So 6S is quite a bit more than your standard 4S battery. And if you solder this right onto these two tabs right here, along with your cable going to your battery, this is going to help your VTX not have as much noise and interference coming from your power system. So one thing they did not include was the two wires that go off for your XT60 coming off the ESC. So you want going to have to provide your own there. But I did also notice that these holes are actually much larger. They're M4s, they're not M3s. They say they're M3s in the specs. They actually do say that on the card over here in the box, but these are not M3s. So you're going to have a little bit of play here. And what I would recommend doing is getting some dampeners somewhere to sort of, when you tighten those down, you do have a sort of a guide here, and use this to keep your standoffs centered when you're tightening these down, because that's going to be an issue. And I'm not sure why they got manufactured like that. That might have been a manufacturing mistake, but hopefully the second batch of these will have the correct spacer size right there for adding on your spacers. That's kind of a bummer, but we'll move on now to the next part of the video. That's going to be the flight controller. Okay, so here's a nice close-up of the Airbus F4, and pretty cool name because the Airbus is a giant commercial airliner, and they're sort of playing off that with this one because, hey, 60 amp is one of the biggest type of ESC setups we have out there in the community right now. So this flight controller is definitely a big deal. So let's go ahead and let's talk about the layout here. It's pretty easy, and again, we have those giant holes here, and we do have that little white guide around the edge of that hole for lining up your standoffs, which is cool. We have the boot button located over here, and what I noticed about this board right away is that there's not a lot of stuff packed in here. It seems like they actually have a little bit of room, so the technology on this board seems to be pretty tightly done. It looks really nice. The layout is not crammed, and the pins on here, or the tabs rather, they look okay the way they're set up. They could be a little neater in here maybe. This looks a little bit jumbled, but everything else looks pretty standard all along the rails here for soldering up your wires. And we have our RSSI there, USB direction forward here, and our wire harness there for our signal. We have battery, negative, and these are in a strange order. They're actually 3, 1, 4, 2 for your motor signals, wires, and I haven't seen that before. That's interesting. But down here we have the boot button, which is normally located next to the USB on most flight controllers, but hey, I can handle that over there. We have your Vtx wire setup here, and they didn't include wires for this. I'm not totally sure why, but we have the positive wire here, the negative wire here, and your signal wire going to your Vtx here. And down here, this is where if you needed to power this flight controller from another power source rather than the wire harness here, you can do that from another type of PDB setup. And also over here for your receivers, we have receivers along this side right here. We have PPM DSMX for you Spectrum guys, S-Bus for Frsky, and you can also run iBus on here if you're running FlySky, which is super cool. We have 5-volt tab here, and this looks like maybe the 3-volt tab, TX6, TX1 for your extra stuff you might want to put on here and wire up. And over here we have LEDs and the tabs where your buzzer is going to go. And up at the very top it says S6 there, so that might be for motor number 6. You might be able to run a hexacopter type setup on this flight controller. That would be kind of interesting, and you can run 6 motors at once if you wanted to. Also up at the very front in the top right we have ground there, we have 5-volt, and for your camera signal right at the very front of this flight controller, so conveniently located right there for your camera wires to come off. And you don't have camera wires included with this. You usually have those with your camera, so those aren't going to be in the box. Now we're looking at the bottom of the flight controller, and they have their Airbus HGLRC there. No dinosaur logo on the bottom, but you do have 2 tabs here with holes as well if you wanted to bring your wires up from your PDB for an external type of powering situation with this board. This is kind of nice. It would keep it kind of nice and neat if you did it from the bottom, and that way you don't have any wires running on top of the board. That's also kind of a cool thought that they did that. Now right here is your F4 flight controller chip, and let's go ahead and peel that past sticker off there. And this is running an 8K sensor on here, 8K gyro inside Betaflight. I believe it said dual 8K on there as well, so interesting, and hopefully it's not too overly sensitive. We did have some boards come in on some diatone quads a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, that had 32K on there, and they were just so sensitive. People were having a hard time tuning them. Mine actually took off and flipped to the ground, so they're releasing a second version of that quad actually now that has 8K on there, so it's good to see 8K on this board. So you shouldn't have any problems with the stock PIDs on this board. They should fly great right out of Betaflight, or if you're using Butterflight, it should fly great. Okay, so now you're looking at the Vtx that comes along with it. It has 2 mounting points right here, and these are correct. These are M3s. They're not M4, so they got the hole sizes right on this, but you'll notice there's only 2 connectors, so this one's going to kind of hang out to the side, and that's fine. You're just going to mount this right above that F4 flight controller, the Airbus, and it's running 5.8, which is a pretty standard protocol in the community, and we have a few different power selections here with race band as well. That's pretty nice. You have 25, 100, 200, 400, and 600 milliwatt. So 600 for long range, longer range, bigger fields, 25 milliwatt and race band if you're racing multi-GP or proximity racing close to yourself, close to your goggle setup or your ground station. So we can also run this Vtx from 7 to 26 volts. So that's actually pretty decent. You're not going to fry this with any of your batteries, even if you hooked it directly up to this. But also I noticed right away that they have an MMCX connector on here, and this is more beefy than the smaller little brother to this one. You want to run this type of connector on VTXs this year. We shouldn't be seeing any of those little tiny ones this year at all, because they snap off all the time in a crash. If they get bumped, even with a little bit of hot glue, sometimes they come off, but this one's not coming off unless you really violently crash. So this is a good addition to this VTX. Let's go ahead and flip it over and look at these pins, and I'll show you how the wires go on here. So we have 2 rows here, and don't let this confuse you. If you're running 5 volt, you can do the top rail, 5 ground, and your video signal on this top bar right here. If you're running 7 to 26 volt, you can use that bottom rail, RX ground, and 7 to 26 volt there. So pretty easy layout for your wires, but they didn't include wires in my kit. I only got the wire harness for the flight controller and ESC, so you might have to provide your own 3 wires right there. Now this is the LED, and there's information in the package that you get with it, and this is the layout right here. So the way this works is short press 4 channels, all the way up 1 through 8 on all your different bands on each band, and it looks like they have around 5 bands. I would say probably 42 channels here. A, B, we have A, B, E, F, R, and L. R will be close proximity racing on 25 milliwatt. Now, if you want to change power modes, that's pretty simple. You just press on this button for about 6 seconds, and this will start to light up, and when it does, then you can short press and change these different power setups. So first one's going to give you that little red light here and 1 bar across the top, that's 25, and 1 bar in the middle and a little red light down there is going to be 100, and 200 is going to be all the way at the bottom here, and a little red light that's going to give you 200. 400, you're going to get 2 bars and a red light, and for 600 milliwatt we're going to get 3 bars across the top and a little red light in the corner. So pretty easy to change your power settings on this VTX, pretty much like any other VTX that I've seen out there that's switchable. The same deal, 6 to 10 second press. Now, one thing that I did notice in this manual, or didn't notice rather, is that there is, it doesn't seem to be any mention of pit mode in here for you guys. So if you wanted to run pit mode, meaning a low frequency just to test your video on your quad before you race, it doesn't look like pit mode is included. So might be something to think about for the version 2 of this GTX. Now, once you have everything put together, this is what it's going to look like. Everything is going to be set up just like this. So you're going to have your wire harness connected from your ESC, your 4-in-1 ESC, up to your Airbus F4, and you're going to use your longer standoffs right here between this VTX and the flight controller. You can see there's not a lot of space here between this USB. You do not want to have these two touch. They might ground out, or they might short out and possibly fry either one of these boards. So we don't want to do that. That's going to be a no-no. But it looks like everything is mounting the way it should in here, and you're going to be able to put this one on some, I'm going to say probably taller quad frames. If you wanted to shorten this bottom one, it looks like you could, because there's not a whole lot. There's one chip there that's coming kind of close, but it doesn't look like you have a whole lot of problem with clearance down here. So not a lot of really tall chips coming off the bottom of these ESCs. It's probably not going to fit in a lowrider frame, but any other type of taller X-mount quad frames, you can probably do that for sure. Let's just go ahead and measure the height of this, because I know some of you guys are going to want that information. That's pretty important for most people that are building these quads. And standoff from top to bottom, I have 28.1 millimeters, and side to side is going to be pretty standard there from the motor tab to motor tab, and it looks like 40.8 millimeters from side to side. And how about this wire harness all the way to the back there? From front to back, we have 46.2 millimeters. Not too bad. Not the shortest stack in the world, but you could relocate this VTX if you wanted it to be a little bit shorter. If we did from the bottom of this one to the top of this standoff, let's see what we get. 19.3 there. So from top to bottom, if you relocated that, that's not too bad. So you might be able to do this on a lowrider setup if you put this VTX somewhere else. Okay guys, let's go ahead and give you a dry weight on this complete AIO with the VTX and all of the standoffs on there. And this is without the battery wires and the XT60 on there, so keep that in mind. But I do have the Vtx wire on here, so 34.2 grams. That's not too bad for an AIO. Pretty competitive weight, and maybe relocating this VTX, like I said before, that might be a shorter option for you, but looks like 34.4. We'll just say it's about 34.5 grams, so pretty competitive and very similar to some of the other ones out there, like the Emax F4 Magnum. If you don't want to run the 4-in-1, I know some people are deathly afraid, scared of burning out an ESC on these, and pretty much, you know, having to buy a whole new one. Maybe this is like $50 and you don't want to spend 50 bucks just to get one new ESC. You can do it like this, and you can run 6S on this. So this is pretty sweet. You do have everything included here with the ESC kit right here. This is what you get. You get a sticker. You do get some heat shrink, some clear heat shrink. You can put that sticker on top of the heat shrink, and you get some pretty beefy, heavy-duty wire here. This looks like 12 to 10 gauge wire. This is pretty thick. So this is going to run from this side of the ESC over to your whatever PDB you're using. So a lot of power and voltage is going to be coming through these wires. So they did beef them up quite a bit. So now we have a nice close-up here of this 60 amp ESC. This thing is titanic. It is monstrous. Now I see why they call it the T-Rex. 60 amps from 3 to 6S LiPo, it says. D-Shot 1200 and also 32-bit in BL Heli, and we have a couple different tabs here. Very simply, the two positive and negative wires that I showed you earlier go off to your PDB. You have your signal wire here that's going to be white, and your black wire here for your gray wire. You have TXD in the middle there, and you have 3 wires here. These are going to be your motor tab wires. And don't worry about the motor direction until you go into BL Heli. You can switch motor direction there, or you can do it the old school way and switch one wire here and one wire there to change motor direction. Pretty cool, an old school trick, but it's a nice looking ESC. It's pretty clean. I'm pretty excited that we can run 6S now out of the box with these, and this is a lot of amps packed into a little tiny ESC, because 60 amp ESCs 10 years ago, they were 5 times the size of this. So Castle Creations used to make some pretty big and industry standard ESCs, but now we're getting super tiny. So put these on the arms of your quad if you wanted to run 6S and you're afraid of the 4-in-1. I would definitely try these out. So let's go ahead and give you an overall opinion of what I see here, and let's talk about this these options that they're giving you. So that's it from HGLRC this week, and that's the latest and greatest 60 amp. I know they've been working on these for a while, and I was talking to Fitz on Facebook there. Shout out to him for sending me this gear to review for you guys. HGLRC, they're doing some pretty interesting stuff out there, and they're trying to stay ahead of the curve and trying to help out with some of those trends that are happening in the race community. So 6S, like I said, it might be the new 4S. I've been talking to people in the field that are racing 6S, and some of those guys are extremely good pilots. They're winning multi-GP races against other people who are flying on 4S. And that's no wonder why. If you can learn how to fly 6S, you're going to win races, hands down. You're going to beat people in 4S as long as you can control your power and you don't crash. So power is nothing without control. So anyway, guys, thanks for subscribing and hanging out on my channel. And please do subscribe if you didn't already. I'm going to have some cool giveaways coming up. And as always in the hobby, help others. If you see someone out in the field who needs help or at the racetrack, foster them and help get them into the hobby, and we'll see our hobby grow. So I'm Justin Davis. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.